Oh dear, listeners. I usually say welcome, 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 but I got a bit of a blank one because I've just looked at this lady's name and I can't pronounce it. What have I done? I should have asked her how to. Rhonda Britten.
Rhonda Britten, Rhonda Britten.
Rhonda Britten. There, I knew all the
Rhonda
time.
Britten,
I was
Rhonda
just.
Britten.
I look at her. You
Eli, you
can't
don't
stop.
know who I am?
No.
What?
Why should I know who you are?
Well, yes, Eli, you should. I've
Why?
been on
Why should I
Oprah. I've
know?
won an Emmy. I've been on TV for
Really?
600 episodes. Come
Uh-huh.
on, Eli.
Isn't it refreshing to not be known and just speak to a
It, it,
person
it
one to
is
one?
it is always I am not known, but I've done a lot of things. But I always make fun of when people always are like, I'm so sorry I don't know you. I'm like, oh please. There's how many billions of people on the planet? I don't expect everybody to know me.
You're not gonna get it.
I actually only expect 5 people to know me.
Listen, you're not gonna get no sympathy from me, so you're not gonna get. I'm sorry, I don't know you. It's not gonna happen, Rhonda.
Excellent. I'm so glad.
But this is good. This is a good start to our relationship. So, as you can tell, Rhonda Britten. Britain, it is Britain.
Yes, it's Britain.
It is. It is. I'm bad with surnames, so please forgive me.
You
She
just
is
call
on
me
the.
Wanda.
She is on the podcast. I do not have a clue really who she is, what her background is, even though she's shocked because she's thinking, God, don't you know who I am? Yes, Rhonda, I do not know who you are, and I'm proud of it. So I will treat you like anybody else.
Oh
We
my
will have
God,
a good
Eli, I love you
conversation.
so much. I love you so much.
So don't worry, we will have
You
a
are
good
the best.
conversation. So, Rhonda, after
Yes.
laughing so hardly,
Oh my God.
let's find out what you do to help people be successful, what your background is, and we'll go with the flow.
Oh, I love that. Well, Eli, I love you so much because I love your authenticity and I love your ability to go with the flow because that's rare, by the way. That's a rare
Mm,
thing.
mm,
So I have been helping people master fear for 30 years. So I
mm,
was one of the first original life coaches in 1995. I've been changing lives and since then I've written 4 books.
mhm,
Fearless Living, Change Your Life in 30 Days, Fearless
mm,
Loving, Do I Look Fat in This? And yes, that last one's funny. And I've done over 600 episodes of reality television. I was actually the
mm,
first life coach on TV in the world to change
mhm,
lives. And so I've had 3 TV shows. But more importantly, I am devoted to help
mm,
people live the life their soul intended. So all of that is things I've done in order to
mm,
encourage and support people to live the life their soul intended. But
mhm,
what drives me every day
mhm.
is recognizing that people do not know how fear works, do
Yep.
not know how to what that live the life your soul intended, and
Mhm.
are not connected from that deep place of spiritual connection and human reality. So that is what I love, that place of difference, that place of uniqueness, that place of individuality. And how do we stand in our truth, stand for who we are in
Mm.
a world that is so filled with fear?
And I love that. Well said. And you can tell she has been doing this for way too long. She said that so well. Rhonda, yes, yes, I can
You know what?
tell you're well seasoned.
But I didn't rehearse it. But that's really what I'm about.
You didn't need to
I am.
rehearse it. You've been doing it for 30 years.
It's in my bones, Eli. It's in my
Well, it
bones.
should be after 30 years for sure. For sure. That no, but seriously, that is wonderful. How you are so authentic in the point of view you still, after all this time, want to help as many people as possible. Be that one to one, or be that from a group, or be that beyond,
Yeah.
and not to be old hat with it after 30 years and still have a passion for doing what you want after 30 years. And to be honest, you're blessed because you're doing something that you have a passion for, which
Yes,
most people don't really get.
that's right.
So, yeah.
That's right.
So,
Well, and they could, by the way, they could,
mm,
right?
mm,
Because we all have a destiny. This is my philosophy. People
mm,
don't have to agree with me, but we all have a destiny, and that destiny takes us on a journey, takes us on a path. that does not just include good, right? It includes difficulties and challenges and sucky days, right? And sucky weeks and sucky years.
Yeah.
But the point is, when they say, the journey's the destination, it is, right?
Yes.
And the more that we can embrace, what are we really here to do? What are we really here? What is it really about? What's our life really about?
Yeah.
And whether it's you have a desire to have a good relationship with your parents, or whether to make $1 million, or whether to find the love of your life, it doesn't matter what the goal is. The goal, I think, is just the carrot, right? It's just the carrot to get you going, to get you moving forward, to get you in action. And then once you're on that path, Eli, then your life happens. So everybody can have a purpose / destiny / passion.
Yeah.
It's just a decision. It's a decision to make. And, I teach a class called How to Find Your Purpose. And in that class, I help people find their purpose. But, at the end of the day, Eli, the key is, are you in love with your own life in the midst of difficulties, or in the midst of, celebration? And, it's hard to live our lives when it's difficult, when we're different, when we're unique, when we're individuals and people don't understand us. It can be very heartbreaking and shattering. Yet what I do know is that we are all here for a reason. And the more different you are, the more unusual you are, the more interesting you are, the more, more you are, then you are standing for each person in this world to be themselves. And what a greater gift to give to the world than that,
I totally hear you, but it's hard to make the change. This sounds beautiful on paper, but what is the underpinnings to making a change within a person's life? What is it that we must look at within our lives to make that change?
Well, I think the first thing, such a great question, is you need to make a decision. Because people, come to me, go to my classes or meet with me, or show up for a free event or something, or listen to me on a podcast, right? And they're like, yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, I want to do it. But that's not a decision. That's not a decision. A decision means a change of action, a change of attitude, a change of mindset. It really is like, I have no idea what she's talking about. I have no idea how to do what she is talking about, but I'm going to decide now that that's the kind of life I want to live. I want to live the life my soul intended. So I am going to take action. So what's the first action? Whether it's, coming to one of my classes, going to somebody else's class, it doesn't matter who you're attracted to, right? To study with, what book to read, what workshop to attend, what therapist to go to. But it's about taking an action and having the humility enough to say, you know what? I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to shift. And I think that's what gets in people's way, is because they think that, look, we're all smart enough. We're all, we've all been around the block.
Yeah.
And so we think like we should know this by now. And that should know this by now is actually what's stopping us from actually moving forward. Because the shame of I should and I'm not stops us from shifting our mindset and saying, you know what? I should know, but I don't. Okay. So I don't know what I'm doing. And you know what? And everything I've done in the past has not moved me where I want to go. So you know what? That was all good. Thank you very much. Awesome. But now I actually have to decide to do something different outside my wheelhouse, outside my box, outside my community, outside my ABC, right? And for most people, that is the scariest thing, to just make a decision to say, you know what, I am no longer satisfied with living in the place of indecision, shooting myself, shaming myself, beating myself up, putting myself down, judging myself, judging others, And so it really starts the decision and that humility to make that decision. And then we must go to, all right, then what action do I take? And of course, I specialize in helping people, move through their fear. And Eli, most people don't even know they're afraid.
Well, the thing is, for the bare facts, they're not taking action for something they know they should be doing. That is fear.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't think of it that way.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
when I was going through my worst time, and I could tell you about the worst days of my life,
mhm,
when I was going through my worst times, you know, I grew up in a family where, one, we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't
uh-huh,
have, right? We didn't talk about emotions. Nobody asked me like, "How are you feeling today, Rhonda?" Like, "Are you okay?" Nobody asked me that, right? And I don't think I'm alone there. I think that's most families, right?
mm,
And so when I never knew I was afraid. That's why it's so hysterical to me. I work with fear, because if you would have asked me in my worst days, when I was drinking, when I was doing my suicide attempts, when I was,
mm,
in the psychiatric hospital, after my third suicide attempt,
mm.
before I decided to quit drinking, when I was at my drinking worst, if you would have asked me if I was afraid, I would have said no way.
Of course.
Yeah,
Mm,
no way.
mm,
So,
mm.
so that goes along. That's why I love that you brought this up, because this goes along with the thing that stops us from saying that, having that humility, letting go of that shame, is the fear that we don't know we have.
Mhm, mhm,
Right? We
mm,
don't even know we have it. And we think it's a character flaw, right?
mm.
We think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I should know. I should be different. I should have all that. No, you're afraid.
Mm.
You're afraid. And once you are willing to admit that and say to yourself, fear is the thing that's stopping me,
Yeah,
not
sure.
my past, or stupid decisions I've made, or my parents, or how I showed up in the world. No, none of that. It's fear.
Mm, mm,
And once we build a relationship with fear, then anything's possible. I mean, and I do mean that literally. And I know
mm.
that's crazy, but it's true. Once you understand how fear works, then everything's available to you.
Well, without a doubt, it's just having a relationship with your partner. Once you understand what your partner needs and etc., then everything becomes easier. And it's the same thing, you're having a relationship with yourself. So if you
That's
see
right.
it from that point of view, then you can create some positive action once
Yes.
you understand it from that point of view. But
Yes.
what I'm interested in, Rhonda, is to understand how you got so passionate to help so many people. So we're going to go right back, because obviously this comes from your own fears and your
Yes.
also troubles and turbulation. It always comes from that. When someone
Right.
is always passionate about helping in whatever sector, in whatever way, it usually comes from a source of
Yes.
what they're trying to help with. So let's go right back when things were really difficult for you, when things were the darkest hole that you've ever been in. Just give us a rundown of how difficult those days were, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, I'm going to tell you about the worst day of my life, because
Mm,
I do believe that, just as you're saying, is that the worst days of our lives actually create the seed of have the seed of our destiny in it.
okay.
And you don't know it at the time, right? Because you're just trying to swim against the
Mhm,
current, right? You're just trying to keep your head above water. You're not sitting there going, "Oh, this is my destiny."
mm,
We don't want this to be our destiny, right?
mm,
But the seed of our destiny is planted. So I'm going to tell you about the worst day of my life. I was 14 years old, and
mm,
I grew up in Upper Michigan, up a little
mhm,
tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year,
mhm,
2 restaurants, Big Boy and Douglas House Buffet Hotel, which was the big fancy place. We had no big McDonald's, no fast food, nothing.
mhm,
And my parents had recently separated, and it was Father's Day.
mhm,
And my father was coming to take us out to Sunday brunch at the fancy Douglas House Buffet, which was a big deal, because I don't know about you, Eli, but we didn't go out to eat when we were growing up. That was too expensive. 3 kids, 2
mm,
adults, that's 5 people. That's a lot of money.
mm,
My
mm,
father was coming to take us to brunch. He comes in the back door. Come on, come on, come on, because that's what dads do. My mom and I are in her bedroom. She's fluffing up her beehive hairdo, got her blue eyeshadow, got her rose-colored lipstick. My
mm,
2 sisters are in our one bathroom,
mhm,
fighting it out.
mhm,
And my father again goes, "Come on, come on." So me and my mom start walking out. It starts sprinkling a little bit. My sisters are still in the bathroom fighting it out.
mhm, mhm,
And as my father says, "I got to get my coat from the car." And this coat is a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat, which in the day was really hot.
mhm,
And so he takes the key, he opens the trunk, and out of the corner of my eye, as me and my mother are walking out of the door, I noticed he has not grabbed a coat, but he has grabbed a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother, "You made me do this. You made me do this." And he fires. And I start screaming, "Dad, what are you doing? What are you doing, Dad?" And he cocks the gun again. He points it at me. And I absolutely 100% believed I was next. My breath stopped, his breath stopped. I blinked, he blinked, he blinked, I blinked. And we just stood there frozen in time. And then my mother yells with her last breath, literally, "No, don't." And my father, realizing my mother's still alive, took that bullet intended for me and shot my mother a second time.
Oh my God.
And that second bullet went through her abdomen, out her back, and landed in the car horn. And for the next 20 minutes, all I heard was, "Ing." And then my father cocked the gun one more time, went to his knees, put the gun to his head, and fired.
Oh my God.
And so in a matter of 2 minutes, I was the sole witness of watching my father murder my mother and commit suicide. Now, I don't know what you would have done, but this is what I did. I blamed myself because I was the only one physically that could have stopped it. And I didn't grab the gun. I didn't kick my father in the shins. I didn't even jump in front of my mother, right? I just stood there saying, "Don't stop. What are you doing, Dad? Stop." Right. And my parents are now dead because I did nothing heroic. And so from that moment on, I basically split into two. You know, there's the outside Rhonda and the inside Rhonda. The outside Rhonda, right? I was a straight A student.
Yep.
I was, you know, went on to get a scholarship for college. I played basketball, was the lead in my plays. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And that's really the chorus I sang is I'm fine. But inside, when you watch your mother die and you did nothing, you don't get to be happy. You don't get to have a good life, right? No, because you low self-esteem, low self-confidence, didn't believe I could really make anything happen. And so from the time I hit college, I found alcohol. I started drinking.
Of course.
Eventually became an alcoholic. Got 3 DUIs, tried to kill myself 3 times. And it was that third suicide attempt when I realized that I'm not very good at killing myself, not skilled at it, and I need some help. And if I really want to die, I can't do it alone. And so here I am now. During those 20 years from when my parents died to when I started really waking up, those years, on the outside, again, I kept that good girl thing up, right? You know, I was still a good employee and I did everything right. And, you know, I tried really hard. And I also went to workshops and I went to read books and I did everything I could to help myself. But, you know, so I did a lot of things and I got a lot of tools, right? But none of it took away the fundamental feeling that I wasn't good enough. Nothing took away the fundamental thing that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. And so in the middle of the night, that's where I was. So it was that third suicide attempt when I realized nothing's changing, even though I'm doing all this work on myself. And I remember thinking to myself, I've got to start over. And I said to myself, what do they do in kindergarten? I mean, this is really the conversation I had with myself. What do they do in kindergarten? I have to go back to kindergarten. I remember saying that to myself. I have to go back to kindergarten. And they said, well, you need a calendar and gold stars. So that's what I did. I went to the store, got a calendar and gold stars. And every day for 30 days, I gave myself a gold star for anything I did that was good. Now, we're not talking brain surgery here. We're talking, I drank and didn't break anything. We're talking about, right? We're talking, oh, I showed up only 5 minutes late rather than 50 minutes late, right? Like, I mean, we're talking minute shifts.
Yes.
But I gave myself a gold star for every single one. And I had to find out if I was worth saving. At the end of 30 days, I had a calendar filled with gold stars. And that was the beginning of true hope for me and the beginning of recognizing that I could truly change. And so all of that work that I had done obviously supported me, but it was really that moment of awakening, that decision, that realization that I'm the one that really had to do the step by step, star by star shifts, right? That was the beginning of my new transformation, beginning of my new life. And of course, it took me years past that in order to become, you know, do what I do today. At that moment, my parents died, and the ensuing years of going between being somebody, oh, Rhonda, you're amazing, you're so good, you know, good employee because I'm a good student, I'm, you know, right, like, oh, you're amazing, you know, and feeling anything but amazing in the inside, and
yeah, of course,
and not having success, right, because I'm one step forward, two step backs, one step forward, two step back, one step forward. And it was only after I made that decision and did those gold stars that I really understood what I had to do in order to truly change my life. And that put me on a journey where I eventually got sober, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why.
That's quite shocking to hear. And obviously that was the beginning of the chaos that you had to live continuously in your life for a very, very long time. So it's not as if, you know, you had this situation happen, which was shocking, got some therapy, 5 years later, learned to live, but it was, you put yourself through some hardships until the camel's back broke, and you had to make that. And because you made that physical change to see those gold stars, you had something physically to look at.
That's right. I still have that calendar, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I still have that calendar.
That was the biggest turning point for you, actually having something physically, and not actually choosing a person to be able to do that for you, which is actually probably a great thing. Yes. But actually you took the action to make some change so you can physically see something actually changing in front of you, which then physically showed you that you were rightly to be saved.
That I had hope. I had hope that something could be different, because it just kept feeling like no matter how hard I tried, I always failed, you know, and I never felt good enough. I never felt like I could ever get past my past. I felt like my past was who I was. And no matter what great A student I was, no matter how well I did on my job, you know, waitressing, etc., I couldn't get past my past. I had no right to a different future because of my past. Okay. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people believe, you know, they see their life and their future, even though we hear all this personal development, self-help stuff, like, you know, today's the first day of the rest of your life. You know, we hear all that and we like want to believe it's true and we pray it's true. But we continuously put our past in front of us. I know I did, right? You know, people would say, Rhonda, you can believe it. I go, yeah, you don't understand. You know what my past is? I was an alcoholic, got 3 DUIs, 3 suicide attempts. I don't think so. Right. So I think we have to be willing to forgive ourselves. Yes. And I think that was one of the hardest things of all, is forgiving my father was actually the easiest.
Was it? Why? I don't, hold on a second. I don't understand that. So please help me.
Because he was clearly the perpetrator. He was clearly the person who took the gun and shot, right?
That's right.
It was, you know, that was easy to identify. You know, dad was broken. I could say a bunch of things about my dad, right? My dad was broken. My dad was at his wit's end. My dad didn't have the emotional fortitude. He didn't have the emotional intelligence, etc. And so he killed my mother and killed himself. So because that's really easy, he's bad, she's good. That was actually easier to forgive. The second person that I had to forgive was my mother, who, remember, she's the victim here. And I had to take her off the pedestal of, oh, my mom, right? And take her down as a human being and see her as a woman who stayed with a man because she was afraid. Because she couldn't leave. And, you know, my father tried to strangle me when I was 12 and my mother didn't take me out of the house, right? Like I think of all the mothers and fathers who don't protect their children, and, you know, the children take it on as, I'm not worthy to be protected.
Yes.
And I had to take my mother off the pedestal and go, but Mom, you didn't protect me. Like I had to look at her and go, as a woman to woman, Mom, you know, you didn't protect me. And take her off the, oh, my poor mother, and look at her woman to woman. And so she was the second person I forgave. And that was difficult to do, because to take her out of the victim mode and make her just like me and, you know, like anybody, and not make her like my mother, she was murdered, you know, just take her as like, she's my mother. And you know what? She could have left my dad a long time ago, and she kept us in the house. And, you know, like she was like, I had to look at her as a real human being with flaws. And making her the victim. Right. And then the third person to forgive was myself. And I was the hardest because, you know, I was the one that was alive, right? I was the one that was still standing. I was the one that could have physically done something. And, people say to me, well, you're only 14. And it's like, but when you're 14, you think like you're 35. And, oh, you're just a 14. You couldn't have done anything. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. I understand that logically, but I have to process those feelings of guilt and shame for not being able to save my mother and not physically doing anything to stop it, and that shame of not taking action, of, not even sacrificing myself for my mother.
Yeah.
I had to really release that shame and that guilt. And again, I get logically, I was only 14, and logically I get that I most likely couldn't have stopped it, right? But emotionally, that feeling of wanting to be the superhero of the people in our lives that we love, I had to forgive myself for not being a superhero. Not forgive myself for not being, smart enough and wise enough. And how didn't I know, how didn't I know my father was going to do this? Right. And how wasn't I aware? Right. So all those flaws. So my father was actually the easiest. My mother was the second, and then I was the most difficult. But I got to tell you, when I took my mother off the pedestal, and then when I was willing to forgive myself, the energy in the room changed. The guilt and the shame just floated off of me, just melted off of me.
Yes.
And I started to breathe. I remember the day so vividly. I remember breathing, and I remember turning away, because I did this whole forgiveness ceremony. And I remember turning away from the forgiveness ceremony and walking in my steps, like walking away from it. And remember, the thought occurred to me, I am walking for the first time as myself, without the burden, without my parents weighing me down. Right. So I had taken them off my back and put, when I forgave them and released them, they were no longer. And I remember thinking, I am walking for the first time steps of my own. These are my own steps. This is my own breath. It's only me now. It's only me. There's nobody to point to, nobody to shame, nobody, not my dad's fault. It's not my mom's fault. You know what? From this moment on, it's up to me. And that was, it took me years to get there. And I thought I forgave him many times. And I think that's true for many people. They think they forgive somebody and they think, well, I already forgave him. Yeah. On one level, I probably forgave my father, 20 times, 80 times, 100 times, and my mother the same. But the day that I did it, ritualized it, and spent the whole day, and I literally spent hours doing all this, I was set free.
I can imagine. And I totally understand from your mother's point of view that you found it hard to forgive her, because obviously the relationship was toxic before, and the protection that you spoke about, but the continuation, she could have stopped that continuation. So I understand that backstory there, and I understand you probably thought we could have been in a different situation. We didn't have to go down this line.
That's
so
right.
I totally understand that situation. A father situation, me personally, me personally, and I'm not saying anybody else, everybody does things individually. But he obviously was going through turmoil and pain himself.
Right.
Maybe it was a situation, he was in a toxic relationship, and he had a problem, but from my point of view, he pulled the gun. I'd have difficulty forgiving him personally. But I'm not saying that you should. Whatever.
No, people come to me all the time and they're like, how could you forgive him?
Yeah.
And I go, when you start understanding how fear works, my father was petrified.
Yeah, that's right.
And my father also didn't have skills. He didn't have emotional intelligence. He didn't have somebody to talk to. Back then, you have to remember, this is back in the day, right? So there was no therapy, there was no men's groups, and so my father was filled with shame, and he had no way, he didn't know any other way to get it off him, right? And so my father, out of his ignorance, out of his understanding, didn't understand what's happening to him, his options were limited. Now, that doesn't mean I wish my father had, was more evolved. And of course, I wish all those things. But I can see how frightening it must have been for my father to be so rejected. Because now, you know, my mother left him once, came back, and now she's leaving him again in his hometown, in front of all his friends for the second time. I mean, I can see how my father, the shame and the rejection was just too much to bear, you know? And nobody got divorced back then. Like nobody got divorced. So now he is the divorce, getting the divorce guy, right? And it's, by the time the second time his wife left him. So I can see as a human being, you know, I mean, think about the last time you got enraged.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, maybe it's 20 years ago, right? Because, you know, most of us have, you know, gotten more evolved in that. But just think of the last time you got enraged. And that enraged just makes you feel like you're out of yourself. Now, sure, we can say my father had to calculate it. He had to go buy a gun. My father didn't have a gun. You know, he had to go buy a gun. He had to go buy bullets. You know, he had to, right? But I see my father in his back against the wall. I do believe in his limited capacity of knowing how to take care of problems, in his limited way of seeing the world. He didn't know any other way to get rid of the pain except to get rid of my mother.
Difficulty for sure. So you learned you got to the stage where you're Zeus and the stars. That was the turning point where something says you are worth saving and you are going to save. So that turning point happened. So what was the process over there? Because again, it didn't happen overnight.
No,
it happened. It started then. I
was crawling in glass.
Exactly. But you're crawling faster this time.
I'm crawling faster because I have more awareness, and and even more than that, I'm more surrendered. You know, because now that I've gotten to that place, you know, remember I'd done therapy and workshops and books. And so all of that became more available to me. All that I had learned kind of clicked into place, right? Before it was all this nice stuff, and I loved learning because I love learning, I love growing, you know, it was all great, but I didn't know how to click it into place. I didn't know how to do what it was telling me to do, right? I didn't know how to, I mean, it was all good and I loved it. It was very inspiring, kind of like
you didn't know how to put it into practice.
No, you know, it's like when I tell my students, when the books tell you to love yourself, I say, how do you love yourself when you don't know how to love yourself? So I'm so sick of people going, just love yourself more, or just accept yourself, or, you know, you just have to believe you're worthy. I'm like, oh, shut up. Right? How do you do that when you don't even understand that? You know, logically you get it, intellectually you get it, but it's like, no, I mean, so the new thing nowadays is people telling people that they have a self-worth issue. Oh my gosh. I am like, no, you don't. You do not have a self-worth issue. You have a fear issue, you know, and so everybody's making it like, again, you're bad. You have self-worth issues. You know, you have low self-esteem. You have to, right? It's that whole shaming thing. Instead, let's drop that and just go, you know what? I'm afraid. Oh, by the way, so are you. And you know what? I got to figure out this fear thing, and I got to start making movements to my greatest, you know, to my greatest benefit to support my soul, instead of worrying about pleasing you and fixing that. I just gotta look at fear and just go admit it. I just gotta admit it. I'm afraid. And you know, that willingness, that surrender that I got to, even willing to admit that I was afraid, was just, again, the forgiveness, the forgiveness, you know, the insight of, wait a minute, I've got to start over, and the freeing, recognizing, being willing to say I'm afraid. All of those things created a synergy that allowed me to explore and to try things and be the beginner that I needed to be in order to change my life, and have the humility to go, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, you know? So those moments started that journey. And so after I tried to kill myself 3 times, had the gold stars, it still took me a couple years to get sober. And when I got sober, obviously that created a whole new thing, because now I had no alcohol, right? I had nothing to placate me.
Yeah.
And so then I had to deal with the shame of drinking all those years, right?
Yeah.
And then the drink, by the way, third DUI, I had to go to jail for a while because that's what they do when you get a third DUI, you have to go to jail, right? So going to jail, humiliating, right? And humbling. And, oh, I was in a year alcohol program. And, so I had to do all these things that I hated and felt entitled. I should not have to do this. Well, yeah, you do, Rhonda. Yeah, you do. And again, it's that humility of going, you're no different. You're no special. Quit trying to pretend that this isn't affecting you. It's affecting you.
Yeah.
And I think most people make themselves an experiment and beat themselves up and judge themselves and think that's going to motivate them. And that is not going to motivate them. That's going to keep them in the swirl of, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I can't do it. While they're struggling on one hand, the other hand is going, no, you can't. So there's that constant push and pull. And instead, when you can see that it's simply, when you can look through the eyes of fear, everything kind of comes into place. It's like, there's no this or that. It's like, oh, fear, got it. And then it kind of cleans everything up, and it takes it away from you being the problem to, oh, this is just fear. And if I can understand how fear works and understand how fear works for me, then I don't have to subjugate myself to beating myself up or put myself down. I can actually just make decisions for my highest good based on who I'm meant to be.
Okay, let me just ask you something. Now, you already know that this podcast, I do these podcasts to help neurodivergent entrepreneurs, people, etc. And the reason being is I'm neurodivergent myself. I spent many years fearing because I wasn't worthy and I can't because I'm the so-called not intelligent enough, which is a lie. So I thought, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, taking that into account, does fear know any difference between you being having a mental illness or your neurodivergence? Is there any difference, or it's just the same? It hits you the same way and you have to face it exactly the same way and you just have to go with the process the same way? Let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I've created something called the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom. Okay. So the Wheel of Fear is how I map fear. And each individual person has different fear responses. Okay. Now, many of them we have the same, right? Like low self-worth, feeling stuck, procrastinating, right? Overwhelm, judging, etc. So those are all fear responses. So what's going to be different between me and you, or you and Sally or Frank or Harry or whatever, is how we respond to fear. So the way fear works itself is the same.
Okay.
How we respond to fear is based on our DNA, based on how we were raised, based on how we interact with the world, right? Based on lots of different things. But how you respond is really the simplest thing to shift. It's about starting to see those fear responses, procrastination, overwhelm, judging, beating yourself up, not thinking you're smart, all instead of making those character flaws and seeing that there's something wrong with you and that, well, you're stuck this way, right? And you can't see yourself clearly because clearly you're super smart, right? Instead of going, okay, wait, those are just fear responses. Those have nothing to do with who I really am, right? So once you can see those ways that you protect yourself consciously and unconsciously, then you can take away that shame and take away the guilt and take away the pain and take away the suffering and take away the beating yourself. You can take away all that.
Yes.
And now you can actually simply get on what I call the Wheel of Freedom. So let me go back. The Wheel of Fear has your core trigger, which is your core fear. Everyone has a core fear, and it has nothing to do with, it's developed by the time you're 5. So it's not developed when you're 20, when your boyfriend breaks up with you, right? It's developed by the time you're 5. And it can be based on DNA. It may have nothing to do with your life this lifetime. Okay. So you have a core fear, then you do these fear responses to protect yourself. And then you do those fear responses to try to make sure that you never have a feeling, what we call the core negative feeling, the feeling you don't want to feel above all else. You do those fear responses thinking they'll stop you from getting that core negative feeling, but you're going to feel it because it's inevitable. And then that core negative feeling is going to take you down to self-destructive behaviors. And I think we all know our self-destructive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I help people identify their core fear and build out their wheel of fear, so that then they can make a choice to jump on what I call the wheel of freedom.
Mm.
The wheel of freedom has something called the essential nature.
Okay.
And your essential nature, Eli, and my essential nature, we cut that off from ourselves by the time we were 5,
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't safe to have that piece of ourselves. We put that piece away. We were like, I can't have that. I'm not safe where I am. I'm not safe in the world. I'm not safe with the people. I'm just not safe. This is not good. I've got to hide this part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we hid it so well that we can't even access it, even when we're like, praying or going to church or doing whatever we're doing, thinking like, oh, I'm going to get that. No, you don't even know what that part is. That part, you just left that part behind.
Mm.
And that part of you is actually the missing piece for you to feel your whole nature. Now, I'll say this is that, there's lots of areas of life, right? There's intimate relationships, there's career, there's money, right? There's, school, there's lots of areas. And you might be fearless already and not be on your wheel of fear. You might be on your wheel of freedom in 9 out of 10 of them, right? Like you might be like, yeah, I'm totally on my essential nature. I totally got that rocking, right? But we're talking about the areas that you're not in, i.e. whoever's listening is not doing well. So whether it's a relationship or money. So think about the areas that are not going well. So your essential nature is that part of you that cut off, that we want to go back and grab, right? Want to kick it back.
Mm-hmm.
And how we do that is we have our essential nature, we claim it, we name it. And therefore, then we're able to do what I call proactive behaviors to keep us on our wheel of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us to what I call the wholeness of who we are. And when we're in the wholeness, we access all parts of ourselves.
Mm.
And then the wholeness leads us into, the truth of who we really are. So there's models for this that I can show you. I got my book here if you'd like, but my job, i.e. my job, Rhonda Britten, your job, Eli,
Mm-hmm.
is to start noticing the easiest place to start is to notice our fear responses. Oh, I beat myself up. Oh, I say should. Oh, I feel judged. Oh, I don't think people like me. Oh, I tell myself I have low self-worth. Oh, I tell myself I'm fat. Again, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And naming those fear responses instead of there's something wrong with me, shifting that narrative. That's just a fear response.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason you have a fear response is you are actually in the works. You are either thinking about it, planning it, in some way attempting to shift something in your life. Because the wheel of fear isn't activated when you're eating Doritos on the couch, right? When you're watching a movie, right? When we're scrolling social media, it's not activated. So the good news is when a fear response comes up, it's actually like, oh my God, I'm actually in the midst of change. And the fear response is meant to stop me.
That's
but
right.
I'm actually in the midst of it all. It wouldn't visit me unless I was thinking, moving, doing something, shifting in some way, whether I just read a book or whether I took a workshop or whether I'm physically doing something. So your fear response doesn't show up. So if you're eating Doritos on the couch, watching a movie, doesn't visit you. So what we want to do is we want to take away the naming of things as good or bad, right or wrong.
Okay.
And we just want to label them. Am I in fear or am I in freedom? Am I in my soul's intention or am I being driven by this unconscious fear right now in this moment? And this can happen when we're at the grocery store. I mean, it happens like that, right? We're at the grocery store, somebody gives us a look, we start feeling bad about ourselves because we interpret that look like quick as a bunny. We unconsciously, we just feel like they're giving us a look, right? And we feel judged, right?
Rhonda, let me just stop you there. Can I just take you back to when you say, let's forget about saying good or bad? Why take that away completely? Why those specific opposites that we must take away and then replace it with what you were talking about?
So good and bad, right and wrong, etc. Those keep us in the black and white mindset.
Okay.
And we want to live in, and I've had clients push me on this, but then they move forward. We want to live actually in the paradox. We want to live on the intersection. We want to be able to live and see bad and good in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think of my father, clearly most of us would judge him as bad, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But wait a minute, what is good about that? What is good about that? Well, what if my father and I had a contract in our previous lives, right? And we reincarnated, and this was our agreement,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my father had the courage to follow through on that agreement. You know, I always think of us as, you know, angels in the sky and
Mm-hmm.
coming up with our next lifetime, right? And my dad's not my dad, of course, but my three little angels up there, and my dad's going, oh, let's come up with something good. And me and my mom are like, yeah, let's come up with something good. You know, let's go. What do we want to do this lifetime? I don't know. What do we want to do this lifetime? Oh, yeah. And my dad, again, who's not my dad, says to me, hey, I know. Why don't you help people master fear? And I'm like, me? Help people master fear? Really? Oh, wow. That really? Should I? And then he goes, well, something bad's going to have to happen to you. And we're like, yeah, something bad's going to have to happen to me. Something bad, really bad.
Mm.
And then he goes, okay, I'll be the bad guy this lifetime. I'll be the bad guy this lifetime. I was like, okay. Well, how about, okay, you be the mom, I'll be the dad, you be the daughter. I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill myself, and you're going to witness. And in heaven, we're like, yeah, that sounds great, right? Because again, everything is an impetus to the next moment. So when you get into good and bad, right and wrong, right? Even negative and positive. I don't even say negative thoughts. I say, you know, I don't say negative energy. I don't even say that. I mean, I'll say it in order to have a conversation, but I that is not what I teach my students. Because again, I want them to understand that energy is just energy. You label it negative or positive for your convenience, but it's actually trapping you. It's actually trapping you.
It's perception, really, because your perception of the same situation and perception is completely different. So positive, negative, or the same situation.
That's right. That's right. So getting out of that black and white mindset, which when people are in fear, they want black and white because then it's easy, right? It's like, oh, that's good, that's bad, right? So now my life becomes easy. I don't have to think. I don't have to decide what's fear and freedom. I don't have to, you know, understand my wheel of fear and then move on to my wheel of freedom, right? It's just black and white is easy, but black and white traps you in fear. You are inside the trap. You are in the hamster wheel. So starting to remove yourself from that black and white, that good and bad, that right and wrong, that negative and positive, actually gives you a completely different world that you're living right now, but through a different set of eyes, like you're saying, perception, you will see a completely different world in the exact world you're living in, a completely different world. So then you really take hold of your destiny.
And I see the power in that. It's very true. And I've always been a person that tries to sit on the fence and not judge, because my lived experience is completely different from somebody else's. And at the same time, I do not know what's really going on in the background. I just see what I see from the front. I do not see their lived experiences. So I make it a rule. I do not care how people live. They should live to be happy. I don't have to agree with what they've done.
That's right.
But I do say, as long as they don't affect an innocent child or a person.
That's right. That's right.
And that's a bias in its own right. But that's the only bias I have.
Yes.
But I like the way you're just totally saying it's totally true. This bad and this good, etc. It does trap you.
It's a trap.
Understandable why people use it.
It makes life easy.
Yeah, but
you don't have to have discernment. You don't have to make decisions. You don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to get outside your box. You don't have to build your compassion muscle. You don't have to build empathy. You don't have to build understanding, right? It's just bad or good. Oh, I'm the good person and they're the bad person, even though most people who think I'm the good person actually hate themselves, right? The most spiritual, I shouldn't say the spiritual, the most religious people I know, if you have a conversation with them, I cannot tell you how many times they say to me, I hate myself, right? Because again, they're the ones trapped, right? They're the ones trapped by their bias. They're the ones trapped by their black and white thinking.
Now, that's very difficult to turn someone from the typical, stereotypical good and bad, because we are born into that situation. Society is made from that. School teach us that. You know, relationships with our partners and so on and so forth.
Yes.
How do you turn that upside down on its head? Come on, show us the secret.
Well, by coming on a podcast like this, right? So they're coming on this podcast and they think they're going to have this conversation, and not that every guest isn't exciting and insightful that you bring on, but they may never have heard it this way before, right?
Yeah.
So now I've just dropped a penny in their soul, right? Something feels like, what? And they may not understand what I'm saying, or they may understand it completely, or somewhere in between, but there's some penny dropped, right? And then maybe they see me on social media, or they read an article I've written, or they go and get my book, Fearless Living. Well, that drops more pennies, right? And then they start just noticing the world and go, wait a minute, if I looked through the eyes, if I looked through the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, they start noticing immediate relief. I mean, people tell me when they get their Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, the first thing like most people say to this to me, my life completely makes sense now. Like, I know why I did that. I know why I didn't do this. I know, like, it makes sense. Which then gives them the empathy and the compassion, the open-heartedness to understand why other people made the decisions they did. Right? So then all of a sudden, if they can see themselves as, oh, I know why I did this. And okay, I see. Okay, that's why I got divorced. That's why I got married. That's why I went to school. That's why I didn't go to school. That's why I quit that job. That's why I moved. Oh, that's why I didn't move. Now their perception of themselves has changed, as you mentioned. So now they can apply that to other people. Well, maybe I'm not seeing them clearly. Maybe now I want to see like Eli, where I'm like, I don't know what's going on, right? Which then gives them a different way to interact. And, during this time, myself included, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to be. I felt like, oh, right? Because you don't have that familiar black and white. And all of a sudden, so I was silent a lot. I know, shocking probably to be true, but I was silent a lot because I didn't know what to say. I was like, well, this is where I normally judge, or this is where I normally complain, or this is where I'd normally, make a joke to, hurt somebody, or insulate myself, or insult myself to make right. I didn't want to, those behaviors I now knew were driven by fear. So I was silent. I didn't know. There was a period of time where I was like a blank slate, and I had to decide, and it took me time, and it was, people would be like, well, what's going on, Rhonda? I'd be like, nothing, just working through some things, and allowing people to have their own experience of me, and really putting my own journey first.
I get that. Let's talk about the Wheel of Freedom. You said you've got some information there you could show. Remember, it's a podcast, so a lot of people can't see. So describe it in such a vocal way, if you could.
Are you talking about the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom?
Yeah. Those two.
So think of a bicycle, a wheel with four spokes. Four spokes. So one is the core, the trigger, the core fear.
Yeah.
And then it moves. So that, let's say that's at the 9 o'clock at the clock face. And it takes you up to fear responses, which is noon. Okay. Now, as you get better at it, you can actually stop yourself right there and get on your Wheel of Freedom right there, like before you even do the fear response. But that's not going to happen in the beginning. In the beginning, you're going to do the fear response. And then you're going to beat yourself up. And then you're going to notice afterwards, like, oh my God, I just did a fear response, right? And when you do that fear response, we're going to go to the 3 o'clock hour. And that's going to go our core negative feeling. So we're going to fall into that core negative feeling. So let me just give you an example. Let me tell you mine.
Okay.
So my trigger, my core fear is loser. Now, what does that mean? Unconsciously, again, because I was never called, I want you to hear this. I was never called a loser. I was a straight A student, class president, didn't score on a basketball team, right? So what your core fear is not, people say to me, well, I was always called lazy, so it's lazy. I'm like, trust me, that is not your core fear, because you cannot see your core fear. So whatever you think it is right now, well, it's failure. Trust me, it's not. Okay. So I was never called a loser ever in my life. Nobody ever thought that, because I was really, really good and not letting anybody see that part of me, right? Because that's my whole cover. So my Wheel of Fear, my trigger is loser. So if you think I'm a loser, if I see you looking at me a certain way, when I'm on my Wheel of Fear, I interpret it as they think I'm a loser. Now, I may not say those words to myself because I didn't have that vernacular yet. I just knew that they didn't like me. I didn't have loser yet, right? So I go on, I do my fear responses. So if I'm afraid to look like a loser, what things you can imagine all the things I could do. I start doing those things, people pleasing, over promising, right? Then which I'm doing those things and I get love for those things. By the way, we get a lot of love for our fear responses, but we never feel satisfied and we feel taken advantage of, but we're the ones doing it. As we do those, we jump down into what I call the core negative feeling. My core negative feeling is worthless. So at the end of the day, the feeling I don't want to feel, which I'll end up feeling if I live on my wheel of fear, is worthless. And when I feel worthless, I'm going to go down to the time of 6 p.m. at the bottom of the circle, the clock. And those are my self-destructive behaviors. That's when, I'm, eating a pint of ice cream or a gallon, right? Where I'm committing doing suicide, where I'm drinking too much, right? And we all know, everybody knows their self-destructive behaviors. We don't even have to have a conversation about that. Everybody knows those, right? And so then I'm in self-destructive and then I tell myself, well, I've got to try harder. I've got to really try harder. I can't. So then I go back to loser. It just solidifies and verifies that, Rhonda, you really better hide yourself better. You better really get better at this. So that's the wheel of fear. Okay. The wheel of freedom has also 4 components, except it goes opposite way. Now, if you grew up in the Midwest, righty tighty, lefty loosey, right? The wheel of fear is righty tighty. And then lefty loosey is the wheel of freedom. So it loosens you up, right? So when you're on your righty tighty. So on the wheel of freedom, on the 3 o'clock hour is my essential nature. And my essential nature, Rhonda Britten, is authenticity.
Okay.
So I just want you to think for a minute, Eli. If you have an unconscious fear of being a loser, do you think being authentic is a good idea? No. Not a good idea. Because, right, if you fundamentally, unconsciously believe that you're a loser, being authentic they're going to know you're a loser.
Yeah.
So being authentic for me is the greatest risk of all. Okay? So whenever I'm doing a fear response or self-destructive, my solution is, wait, Rhonda, you're on your wheel of fear. Wait, stop. What do you got to do? Be authentic. Oh my God, be authentic in this moment. Yep, be authentic. What would you do if you were being authentic? I would speak up. I would say no. I would, ABC, right? Then I have created a list of proactive behaviors. So that goes up to the hour. So I'm in my essential nature. I identify, okay, Rhonda, it's time to be authentic. I go up to my proactive behaviors, which are the things I'm going to do, say, etc., that are going to help me access my authenticity. Okay. Then my wholeness, so my wholeness, I go from authentic into self-acceptance. Now, again, yours are going to be different. But for me, Rhonda Britten, when I accept myself, my fear remembers loser, accept myself fully and completely, authentic and loser, then I, Rhonda Britten, have access to everything: intimacy, confidence, power, etc. Right?
Okay.
And then I move to my last one, which is the behaviors on my wheel of freedom, self-actualizing, right? So that now I'm effortlessly being patient. I'm effortlessly thinking powerful, positive thoughts. So I'm effortlessly living in my truth. Proactive behaviors, I have to make a decision. But once I have my wholeness, I naturally do it. So on my proactive behaviors, I have to decide to be patient. But when I'm naturally being patient, I'm already living in my wholeness. So the good news is, Eli, you can jump off your wheel of fear anywhere. You can jump off it between your trigger and your responses. Most people, and myself included, will get off it between fear responses and our core negative feeling. And then, of course, as we learn this, we're gonna feel worthless, and then we're gonna get off it. We're gonna be like, oh my God, there's worthless. Rhonda said this worthless thing is gonna happen. And again, you're gonna have a different word than me, most likely.
Of course.
Whatever your word is, right? Right. And so your word, failure, reject it, whatever it is. And then when you have that feeling, which is what most of us relate to, we go, oh crap, I'm on my wheel of fear. Now, you don't have to figure out why you're on your wheel of fear. It'll come up. It'll be easier as time goes on. The most important thing to do is jump off that sucker and get onto your wheel of freedom.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And then it's like, okay, Rhonda, if you were being authentic, what would you do right now? What would you say right now? Who would you be right now? And again, maybe being authentic would be to walk away. Maybe it would be to go soothe myself. Maybe it would be to speak up, right? Depending on the environment and how safe I feel. But that's when you quit looking at life through wrong or right, good or bad, you know, there's something wrong with me, because there's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. And you look at through at these mental models called the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom. It takes away that shame, that burden, that something's wrong with me, and just makes it a, oh, okay, okay. This is just how I operate from a neurobiology way. Ah, okay. And I can shift it. Yeah, you can. So life becomes so much simpler.
Of course.
And the burden is lifted, and the energy and space you have to create. And yeah, I'll just say the burden and space, the burden lifts, and the space that you create, the space that you have now to create a life that your soul intends, is magnified, 100-fold.
You know what? There's so beginnings.
Yes.
It's
the important beginning, Eli. It's the important beginning, because fear is just a mechanism. And once you understand how it works for you personally, the game changes.
Unfortunately, we have to call it a day, and I would love to have you on again if possible.
Please, let's
and we take it to the next
part 4.
I don't even think it's possible to do it in 4 stages, to be honest. Rhonda, listen, I really appreciate you coming on, and let's speak later to see if we can take this further, because there's a lot to go in. I wanted to speak about you, how you started, why you've taken this journey, and so that took a lot of the podcast. But obviously there's more to be said, obviously, to teach people so people have an understanding, so they can forge forward, regardless whether you're neurodivergent, atypical, or any of the above. It's irrelevant, as you've described, and it makes sense what you're saying. And it would be wonderful if you could come on again and we can have that in-depth chat, and we would be blessed to have you on.
Well, thank you. And I say yes.
And I tell you what, listeners, we are so lucky to have her on. And I knew it was going to be a beautiful podcast, a fun one. And we get on, actually. And I'm a bit nutty, but obviously Rhonda agrees that I'm a bit nutty. She's going to agree. So I'm going to say she agrees before she says it. I got there before you, Rhonda.
I think you're delightful. I have enjoyed our time together so much. And I do want, if anyone is interested, I do have like a 3 15-minute videos people can watch, just to start getting the conversation about how fear works, and how to take a risk, and how to have goals, and how to make dreams happen. Just go to fearlessliving.org, fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK, fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK. Put your name and email in, and you'll get access to 3 15-minute videos and a workbook and everything. And it'll start sharing with you how to start putting a dream and taking action, and why maybe that action hasn't happened. And in the 3rd video, I talk a little bit about the Wheel of Fear, so you can find out more about it.
And with that said, leave one thing with the listeners, just one piece of gold for the listeners. That's that one thing. Go on.
I got it.
Go on.
I got it. There is nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. If you could drop that in your heart, if you could drop that in your bones and your cells, and really decide to believe it, whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter, but you decide to believe it. What if Rhonda's right? What if Rhonda's right that there's nothing wrong with me and it's just fear? What if Rhonda's right? Just a thought.
And I agree with my hands up wholeheartedly, for sure. Rhonda, thank you so much. You've been welcome. An absolute diamond, and I am blessed. Me personally, I'm blessed that I came across you, even though I still don't know who you are. You're not very important, so don't even think you're important in anybody's life, including my life. And I'm going to admit to that. But I do like the information you give, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And with that said, listeners, as you can see, Rhonda is a very special, unique individual with um, some amazing mindset. I've been memorized by what she says. I've resonated with the things she said, with my mouth open and the jaw dropping. And if she resonates with you, please, please, please go over to the link that I'm going to put below and actually just connect on the website, connect with her, and she's got plenty of books out there. So I'm going to put those links to the books and all the resources you'll get there. And you have nothing to lose but time itself. It's not going to hurt you. It makes sense. You know it makes sense. So connect and connect well. Rhonda, thank you once again.
You're welcome. Be fearless.
Yeah, we'll do. And in the meantime, like, subscribe, and do all those wonderful things. And sayonara, Rhonda.
Hold a second, Eli. Somebody's at my door. It might be my handyman.
Yeah, go.
Yeah,